Hey, folks. I'm Charlotte Observer Panthers beat writer Mike Kaye. I'm joined by Charlotte Observer sports columnist Scott Fowler, and we are about to process blue for you on the Processing Blue podcast. Scott, how are you this morning?
Good, Mike. How about yourself?
Uh, I mean, I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. I'm in the middle of a move, so a little stressed, but we've got a lot to talk about today. We're going to talk about Jalen Coker's new contract. I broke down the details on Thursday night when it all happened. We'll go through the contract. We'll go through what that means for him and the wide receiver room. We're also going to talk about what it means for Xavier Legette. And then we'll talk a little bit about minicamp as we head into the break before training camp, as well as the players that we are most looking forward to seeing put on the pads. Scott, let's start off first. Jalen Coker, the big news on Thursday night, agrees to a 3-year, $34 million contract extension that will put him in process blue through 2029. This links to his previous qualifying offer 1-year contract that was worth 1.08 million. So he's essentially signing a 4-year, $35 million deal. As I reported exclusively the other night, he's going to get 19.5 million in guaranteed money. He also got a $7 million signing bonus. So the way I would look at this is it's basically 2 years guaranteed, and then on top of that, you're getting 2 free years that would have normally, not free years, but 2 years assigned that would normally be his free agent contract years. So what are your immediate takeaways from this contract that, if he meets all of his incentives, can make him up to $41 million?
Wow. Well, he's come a long way from being an undrafted rookie free agent out of Holy Cross. This is it's remarkable, really, his ascent. When you look at his numbers, you go, "Wait, why did they give him so much money?" If you just purely looked at the numbers, uh, but that's a lot because he's been hurt at times, and when he's performed, he became such a clutch player for them at the end of last year. In the playoff game, he had 134 yards of receiving and a touchdown, and he was, along with T Mac, basically that was where their two weapons. He's ascended to number two, and this is a contract based on potential, and I like it. Ultimately, I like it. I think Jalen Coker feels like a guy who's going to get better. I love his hands. His catch rate is something like 70%. The ball goes toward him, it gets caught an awful lot. And I think this is long term, really good for both parties. What do you think, Mike?
I'm actually kind of surprised he took more than a 2-year deal, because the logic there would be the Panthers benefit from him having those additional 2 years. Um, he's not going to be a restricted free agent, so he won't get a first or second round tender. He will not be an unrestricted free agent like he was supposed to be in 2020 or following the 2027 or the 2028 season. So I think, or before the 28 season, excuse me. So I think for him, this was about understanding that you were a big part of the process. The Panthers are getting this extension done now so that they don't have to pay him more down the road. And listen, if he becomes a 1,000-yard receiver, this contract will be reworked. He will be rewarded. But I think for now, when you look at it from his point of view, he went from getting an undrafted free agent salary, a minimum salary, to getting what top 10 pick wide receivers are getting. He's making just between what Jordan Tyson, a top 10 pick for the New Orleans Saints this year, and Marvin Harrison Jr., a top 10 pick a few years ago, are getting right now. He's going to make $8.75 million on average per this 4-year contract. And so I think he has to feel good about the future. He's solidified as the number 2 guy, as you said. And then I also think on top of that, it gives everybody a proven dynamic. So you have your top 2 wide receivers. And then from there, you've got to figure out the slot position or the number 3 position, depending on how they want to use Jalen. But beyond that, you've got a bunch of young guys developing behind him. And I'll give you some insight. He scored his first touchdown in Denver his rookie year. And I remember David Moore glowing about him. And David Moore is a guy that a lot of people equate like the mentor tutor thing to Adam Thielen. Well, David Moore was kind of more of that guy. He was kind of like a what do they call the assistant to the professor who does the grade?
TA,
Yeah,
teaching
yeah, he was
assistant.
basically
Yeah.
the TA, and so I didn't have a lot of those at the University of North Florida, if I'm being honest. But like I think what's interesting for him is there were guys that were glowing about him. I remember Andy Dalton talking about him during the summer when he was on the practice, like when they were just in training camp. There were guys that saw the potential in him, and eventually he got there. And after 22 games, he has gone from, like you said, a small school guy who went undrafted to being paid like a top 10 pick. And the only caveat to that is he's not going to hit free agency when he was scheduled to hit unrestricted free agency in a couple of years. And instead, he basically has 2 more years onto his contract that pay him at a pretty solid market value. If he's an 800-yard receiver, this is a bargain. And I think that's the way the Panthers are trying to look at it. But I think I think the obvious collateral damage, so to speak, of this all is how it affects the guy who was drafted in the first round the year that he signed an undrafted contract, Xavier Legette. Scott, take me through your mindset and your kind of process with how Xavier Legette stacks up following this contract extension, because this is a pretty lucrative deal and it's a pretty sound investment for the next 4 years. What's your take on Legette as he enters an extremely important contract year? Well, not contract year, but a 5th-year option essentially year.
Yeah, I think Jalen Coker just took a lot of the money that at one point people probably thought was going to go to Xavier Legette. You cannot pay everybody, and you can't pay a number 3 wide receiver anywhere near that sort of money generally, unless they're just a real spectacular. You're running some offense that has crazy good numbers, which the Panthers don't. So you really can only pay 2. This to me makes it more likely long term that Xavier Legette will not be here if he can prove himself, or even if he can't. Now, if he stays at a level that's kind of mid to lower, maybe he can be. He's not going to be rewarded lucratively here, because I think they just showed you where that money's going, and that T-Mac, they're going to do whatever they have to keep him. He'll end up getting paid more than Jalen Coker soon, before too long. And so that's 1 and 2 and 3. And in most offenses, there's only so much money to go around. You still have to pay Bryce Young. That's going to be an enormous payment down the road, assuming things can keep progressing. So what'd you think?
Well, it reminded me of in Jacksonville. I covered a similar situation, not completely the same, but Allen Robinson had 1,500 yards and like 15 touchdowns, like had an unreal year in Jacksonville in 2015, his second year of his contract. He was a 2nd-round pick. They also took Marquise Lee the same year as him in the 2nd round. He was an injury-plagued player. He's kind of the Legette in this situation for different reasons. And then they had an undrafted wide receiver, Allen Hurns, who had 1,000 yards. They got ahead of his 3rd year and gave him a large, lucrative contract extension with not a lot of guaranteed money, but they rewarded him. And that's kind of what they're doing with Jalen Coker here. That's the most similar precedent I can think of with a deal like this. Mm-hmm. And a lot of things can change. Allen Robinson went from being a Pro Bowler to tearing his ACL in week 1 of I believe it was his 4th season. Didn't end up getting re-signed. Ended up having a really nice career with the Bears and moving around quite a bit. Marquise Lee got a cheap extension, but was out of the league a few years later. Hurns got cut a few years after his guarantee, or a year after his guarantees were done. So you never know. The point is the NFL is very fluid, and I wouldn't wish that on anybody. But what I would say is Legette has wiggle room to prove himself. Everything I've heard behind the scenes has been positive. They're happy with the way he's handled the adversity. They're happy with the way he has gotten along with teammates. They're happy with his work ethic. They're happy with how slender he is. I had made mention of it early in OTAs that I thought he looked significantly slender. He later said that he had lost some poundage. And I like his self-awareness. I like how he said basically, I can't have another year like last year. He poetically enough said it right as they were negotiating this contract, and it was eventually signed the same day. So I think he's coming at it with the right attitude. But if they're going to keep 6 wide receivers and they want to keep some of these young guys, but they also want to keep David Moore or Bryson Tremaine, some of these guys, they might have to shop around some of their wide receivers because that's a pretty crowded room. I wouldn't say they're a great room, but they're a crowded one. And I think Legette has a lot to prove, specifically in a battle with Chris Brazzell, who I think is getting a lot of hype, but I wouldn't kind of run away with giving him the crown for the number 3 job at this point.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a spot player right now. From watching him in minicamp, I mean, he's fast, but honestly, I've seen faster, and he's his hands are fine, but I've seen better. I feel like he didn't. They threw him some deep balls. I didn't feel like he was never that I saw open by 5 yards and just rolling past people like Ted Ginn used to do sometimes in practice. You just marvel at how much space he had created. But yeah, I mean, Legette, I think, look, I put this out in a tweet last week, but T-Mac gained 17 pounds to get to 220. So he says Xavier Legette lost 7 or 8 pounds to get to 220. So again, I think Dave Canales has a type here. He likes his big wide receivers to be about 220 pounds. That's where they'll both go into. I think that does probably help Legette, who's struggled to create separation, I think, besides, sometimes questionable hands. He's just not open enough. And so maybe, as you say, a little bit more slender, leaner, meaner Xavier Legette, who knows? I mean, one of those guys could get hurt in week 1, as you say. You just don't know. Legette might have a huge year, but I'm sure they're glad to have him around this year as they give him another chance to complete his transformation, was the word Brad Idzik used. Let's see if he can transform himself.
Yeah, I think Brad is also of the mind that he wants to spread around the ball. Now, I think ideally T-Mac has between 1,100 and 1,200 yards and 7 to 10 touchdowns. Jalen Coker has between 700 and 900 yards and 6 touchdowns. I think Legette, if he's that third, I think you want the third guy to have about 450 and 5. Yeah. And while that is doable, we saw that essentially during his rookie year, close to it. I think it's how you obtain those yards as the third guy that'll be the big difference. With Brazzell, I'm looking at more yards per catch. Like, you want a guy like that with his profile to be like a 14 yards per catch guy. So
yeah, he's valuable just to run, like just to get. I mean, he's going to help some of these other guys get open underneath. But I just don't. I bet the guy. I don't know. Who knows about yardage? But if he has more than 250 or 300 this year, I'd be surprised unless there's a big injury.
Right, I agree with that. I think that's a sound take. But speaking of mini camp, I kind of wanted to talk about obviously fans aren't there, but you and I have covered a lot of training camps and a lot of OTAs in our careers. You more so than me. But I kind of wanted to get your take on the vibes of OTAs, because I thought there was a lot different from these OTAs than the previous 2 under Canales, just in earnest. What would, if you had to take away one sentiment from the vibes during these OTAs, what would you say?
They just seem more confident to me. It feels more like a team that hasn't arrived, but also knows they're sort of on the train. Whereas before they were just in the station, just hoping one was going to come by that they could catch. I think now they actually know, hey, we're actually pretty decent already. And that, and the other word I would use would be stability. It is just interesting to me to see a head coach under David Tepper entering his 3rd year. and a quarterback who's entering his fourth year. And that's a lot of stability for a team that hasn't had much since, Ron Rivera and Cam Newton were here back in the 2010s. There's been so much turnover. I talked to Tommy Tremble about this some and wrote a story on him that's available now on our website. But he was just talking about how interesting it was, how weird it was in a way that they know each other's names, almost all of them now, and it's not like a whole glut of new players is coming in. They're fixing holes now. They're spackling. They're not trying to build a whole new foundation anymore. The foundation is there. So that's what stuck out to me. How about yourself?
But you said spackling, and during this move period, that just like struck a nerve. I would say competitive. OTAs are not really what you want to. I've said this. I've told the story on the podcast before, but like Doug Marrone, when you were in Jacksonville, if you called an OTA at practice, he would give you an earful. He wanted us to call them workouts, or like I forgot what the other term was, but it probably wasn't safe for air. To me, these were legitimate practices during mandatory minicamp. I thought OTAs, they were really competitive for a non-contact practice. There was a lot of energy. It just kind of seemed like, let's get the ball roll. There was an urgency, if that makes sense. And I think that's important when you talk about the connective tissue that you kind of talked about with, there are a lot of guys, and a lot of Matt Rule criticisms are out there, and rightfully so. But you look at the core of this team, and you look at the Derek Browns, the J.C. Horns, Chuba Hubbard, Tommy Tremble, and some of those guys who are really the locker room leaders of this team. And you can just kind of feel the urgency. You can kind of feel the awareness of how important this offseason is for everybody involved. And I think for the Panthers to get off on the right foot, it's not about playing the guys in the preseason games. It's not about the joint practices. It's about starting with your right foot forward, so to speak. You want to make sure that no rep is wasted. And the totality of the summer is so important to getting off to a good start when you have the schedule that you have, and you know that your bye week is coming early. You want to do the damage before the bye week, because then when you're rested, you're going through a gauntlet. And I think having the right mindset and having that urgency can transition over to summer and kind of give you some progress. But speaking of summer, I wanted to get your take on who is the new player that you are most excited or most looking forward to seeing when the pads come on in late July, when the Panthers return to training camp. Obviously, they don't do pads July 22nd when they report, but towards the end as they prepare for the Hall of Fame game.
Well, I'll pick an obvious one, but I really want to see Jalen Phillips. They paid him so much money. He is kind of supposedly supposed to be the crown jewel of the free agency class, and a guy who's looks the part in a lot of ways. I mean, if you're arriving at a stadium and you're trying to send people off the bus and impress the other team, Jalen Phillips, Derek Brown, there's a couple more we could probably name. You throw them out of there. You throw them out first because he looks very much like a football player. He is a very good football player. He needs to become a great football player. And that's what they're paying him to do, to be a guy who gets double-digit sacks for the first time in his career. He's right in the heart of the prime of what should be the prime of his career. And I keep hearing all these great things about him, but I want to see it. I want to see what he looks like. I want to see how this athleticism translates in this defense. That's where, to me, it just really showed up last year in some of the big games. They just could not get to the quarterback. We saw it most, recently with Stafford and the Rams on that final drive where he just back there patting the ball, just waiting for somebody else to get open. I want to see what Jalen Phillips looks like. How about yourself?
I'm going to cheat a little, but I'm going to say it as a position. So Monroe Freeling and Rasheed Walker are the two guys that I want to see. Unlike center, where it feels like it's Luke Fortner's job to lose, And from all accounts that I've spoken with, it does really seem like it's Fortner's job at center to start off with. They're going to take their time with Sam Heck. Nick Samek's going to compete. Walker and Freeling, to me, seems like it has to be a competition in earnest. Walker got the bulk of the left tackle reps of the first team during OTAs and minicamp. But Freeling's a first-round pick, and he is notably athletic. I know a lot of people talk about taking their time with the quarterback. I was the guy that was saying Bryce Young shouldn't start his first few games because Andy Dalton was the ideal bridge. We saw how that happened when they rushed him out there. Left tackle to me is a position where I feel like you learn from doing. And writer's right, left tackle's block. I want to see how Freeling looks with the pads on. I think his upside's tremendous, but Walker's done it before. I think we equate Walker's contract, which is basically a swing tackle, 1 year prove it deal, and then say, well, he's cheap, and if he performs well, it's a bargain. Yes, that's true. But I also think when you take the plunge to take somebody like Monroe Freeling, when you have somebody like Ike Ekwonu, who has been with the team and is recovering from a major knee injury, you don't know when you're getting him back, you don't know how effective he's going to be. You kind of want to pull the cord and see what's there. Unless you feel really tentative about how Taylor Moton can hold up during an entire season. That's the only other reason where you would say, hey, let's give him a swing tackle year. Drink, Scott. Scott
twice already in a minute. That's good. That's right on your average. Yeah, swing tackles.
Yeah. Hey, Dave brought it up on like.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I mean, hey. But I guess my point is, I want to see how true of a competition this is, and in my opinion, it should absolutely be a true competition. Dave Canales said that he loves playing rookies, but sometimes they need to take a step back and look. And I saw on social media that some folks took that as it's Rasheed Walker's job to lose. No, that's the whole point of OTAs and minicamp. And when I bring up that energy and that competitiveness, it's important to harness what you're learning there and take it into the summer. And I think they did right by Monroe and giving him an onboarding platform because he is weeks behind in the offense. But I think you got to let it rip in the summer and let the best man win. So I'm excited to see that left tackle battle. On the opposite side of that, there are a ton of guys that are back, a bunch of guys who re-signed on 1-year deals. Even Sam Martin got a 2-year deal. Let's talk about the incumbent players who need to step up. Let's kind of avoid the XL of it all because we already know that's out there. But who's a guy who's returning that you need to see progress from on the field, in the lineup, with his role?
Jonathan Brooks, to me, he's been a teaser. His entire career in the NFL, and I know he doesn't want to be thought of as that, but that's what he's been because he's so darn fast. He looks so good when he's out there, and he just has barely played at all. And they need that. They need a game breaker type at running back. Chuba is a guy who's, I love him as a locker room leader. I like him blocking, against a blitzing linebacker and on 3rd and 2. He is not going to break you off a 60-yard run. Jonathan Brooks might. Trevor Etienne might too. But they need some of that from running back where they get some chunk plays. And so Brooks, to me, is the guy I guess I want to see the most. I just love to see him. Man, I'd love to see him play like 14 or 15 games this season and see what shakes out.
So I'm going to go with Brooks's draft classmate and former Texas teammate, Jatavian Sanders. Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, he's facing a similar outlook to Jonathan Brooks in that he has dealt with some season-ending injuries. He hasn't been particularly durable. He hasn't been all that consistent. And he's got a Matt Rule era player in front of him in Tommy Tremble, who is serviceable, who does what they ask him to do, who can do kind of everything, but isn't going to be that home run hitter, as you said, with Chuba Hubbard. And I just think Jatavian Sanders' upside is tremendous. We saw during training camp, I thought he was the best offensive player in training camp last year. And that was a widely agreed upon thing amongst us, amongst other reporters who covered the team. when you are investing as you're investing in Coker and obviously T-Mac, and then you're going to run some 11 personnel with 3 wide receivers or 12 personnel with 2 tight ends, you really need to have both the dynamic guy and the two-way blocker receiver like Tommy Tremble. I think in 3 receiver sets, Tommy Tremble is going to get the bulk of the work because he can block and he can catch. With Sanders, when you're in those 2 tight end sets, you need to be able to take advantage because you're essentially taking the slot receiver off the field, and Ja'Tavion Sanders is essentially your big slot. So we need to see him be dynamic. He needs to stay durable. He showed signs during his rookie season that he could be an extremely dynamic player until he had the neck injury, and then it seemed like everything fell off a cliff. He looks good athletically. He's a guy who can get open at the position. He's a mismatch for safeties and linebackers. I want to see him put it together, have another really strong training camp, and take that into the regular season because he does have the upside to be a 50-catch, 550-yard, 7-touchdown player and essentially be that third wide receiver if they really wanted it. They wanted him to be. Keep the third wide receiver off the field, get Ja'Tavion Sanders more involved. That should be his goal. And I think that's where the Panthers want to see his upside kind of come to fruition. But Scott, as we wrap this up and we close out our final show before we go on hiatus for a few weeks, we'll be back the week before training camp. So that should be a stellar show, and we'll have Alex back in here. Maybe we'll do a trio show just to welcome you back to the fold. But Scott, do you have anything coming up that you want to promote or talk about?
Well, I'm going to go back for a second, actually, and since we are in the middle of summer and we have a lot of listeners who are outside and going outside and about to go to the beach and whatever you're doing outside, because it's going to be beautiful the next couple of months, and I hope you all get some time off. But let's all follow Dave Canales' advice. I thought he really did a service last week because he didn't have to do this, but he had a basal cell carcinoma removed from his nose. This was sun damage, basically. And he tries hard. He's got long sleeves on all the time. And, he tries not to get sun damage. But like many people, he is outdoors a lot in his job or in his recreation. And so my last, I don't have much coming up, except I would say I'm going to try to get outside myself a little bit. But let's put on sunscreen, guys, and let's get out there and be smart about it. We don't, skin cancer is no joke. It's the most common form of cancer. And let's all avoid it and just have fun safely out there.
I was actually thinking of Dave when I went to Target and bought my sunscreen this morning. So
there you go.
I agree. He did us all a service there. Also want to bring up the Axis Panthers newsletter. We will continue that. That's not going on hiatus. You will get a Monday morning surprise. Well, I guess it wouldn't be a surprise if you sign up for it, but a Monday morning gift from Alex or myself every week through training camp. And then once the season starts, it'll be twice weekly. You can get all your content there. If there's breaking news like the Jalen Coker deal and you're trying to avoid social media, you'll get updates from that. We want to keep you engaged throughout the summer. I know it's, as Scott said, a lot of people are outside. So here we're just sending stuff to your email inbox, which you would look at anyway with your bills and all your other stuff. We're a little bit more fun, just a tad more, but how about that for a sell? Let's send this home, Scott. I'm ready when you are. Thanks, as always, for listening to our pontifications on all things Panthers with Scott Fowler and myself and our wonderful producer, Zach Dennis. Please subscribe and follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you get your podcasts by searching Processing Blue. And if you watch us on YouTube, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and click on the bell icon to get notified whenever new episodes drop. And finally, please be sure to stick to charlotteobserver.com for all your Panthers needs. Scott, stay humble, stay creative, and keep processing. Zach, that's a wrap.